Hello, everyone. I'll wait another minute or so to let more people jump in, and then we'll get going.
Oh, wow.
Hello, everybody. I am Paul Regelbrugge. I am the Teaching and Learning Specialist with the Holocaust Center for Humanity, and today I am happy to be joined by friend and colleague Branda Anderson, who I will more formally introduce right before her part of the presentation. And today's topic is Defiant Requiem, Teaching the Holocaust Through Lessons of Resistance. And so what we like to do today is to sort of, in the first part of it, provide you kind of an overview regarding, the center, a reminder, I suppose, for many of you, the center's work and the best practices resources, segueing into the theme of resistance, which is the primary subject for today. Throughout this presentation, if you have questions, please enter them into chat, and we will attempt to address them either as they come up or whatever ones we don't get to in the process. We'll make sure that we get to at the very end of the presentation. So at the Holocaust Center, we teach the lessons of the Holocaust, inspiring students of all ages to confront bigotry, indifference, promote human dignity, and to take action. And as many of you know, we have a wide array of resources that many of you have been using in the in-person realm, and hopefully some of you are already taking advantage of in terms of what we have to offer in the virtual realm. Because yes, indeed, we have verb of the pandemic pivoted our resources so that we can do virtual speakers presentations. We have speakers already going out and, well, virtually presenting to different classes throughout the entire Northwest, actually. In addition, we have live virtual field trips where we have a docent who can then, walk your students through some of the key facets and exhibits within our center, and those are already becoming increasingly popular. So please contact us if you'd like to arrange either or both the virtual field trip or the live speaker presentation for your students in your class at a good juncture to spruce up and enhance your Holocaust lessons. In addition, yes, you still can borrow our teaching trunks, which are widely popular, especially English teachers. There are so many different books. You can do literature circles with them. There's hands-on artifact kits as well that you can order independent of the full teaching trunk. And so in this way, through these artifacts and a number of the other resources contained within our trunks, you can help personalize stories, and through hands-on activities and things, it really resonates really well with students. In addition, of course, we provide our weekly lunch and learn sessions, professional development sessions such as this. We have our free book by book program that is continuing at least until the end of this month. And we have other opportunities for students, their student leadership board, and we have educators for change, where we have different teachers who are helping to work with us and inform us as we continue to try to contribute to their own teaching and learning as well. So it's a real vibrant place. If you haven't become intimately attached or familiar with our work, please reach out to any of us. We will do our best always to make your experience in teaching this difficult, complex subject as positive as possible, both for you and for your students. And one of the biggest things, and this is what I want to share here today, one of the biggest features here that is really important is our best practice resources. For those of you, I know we are also joined by teachers and others from states outside of Washington State today, and I'd particularly like to welcome those from Oregon. And thank you to our partnership there through Amanda Coven over there that has helped promote this particular session. So hello to you. And we feel that these best practices resources that were specifically created as a result of Washington's Holocaust education law, SB 5612. And basically we were tasked and asked to create these resources for all teachers in the state. And but again, though there are specific facets that connect into Washington State in terms of various activities, these are definitely, adhering to, and sort of the scope and sequence would work for any teacher in any state in any country, really. And so far, people are using them. Districts have been working with us, schools, teachers, and applying and implementing various facets of these best practices. Of course, we are well aware that many of you already have been teaching in accordance with the best practices, but for those teachers, then this is really incredible supplemental work, hopefully, and ideas maybe that can enhance your current lessons or units. So I'd like to just give you a little bit of an overview regarding it. So first of all, as I mentioned, the SB 5612 is the Holocaust education law. And that law, though it strongly encourages that all teachers teach about the Holocaust in grades 6 through 12, it's technically not required. However, sort of the tricky part about that is that if a person is teaching about the Holocaust, then they are indeed required to adhere to what these best practices are. These best practices are found first and foremost directly on our website, Holocaust Center for Humanity. But in addition, you can also access them through the OSPI site for Washington State. So we tried, and we really did our best to make these accessible to teachers regardless of your experience level. So if you were coming to this and it's like, oh my gosh, this is the most daunting topic in the world, it's overwhelming, it's too complicated, and now I'm supposed to teach this, where do I begin? So we really tried to take that to heart. And what I'm really going to spend just a few minutes sort of showing you here is what a real nutshell or synopsis version of what I've been presenting to many districts right now, and that is the foundational pieces. So where it says here, review, beginning your Holocaust unit. So if you scroll down a little bit, here you can see that we not only have this section, beginning your Holocaust unit, and we also have this kind of navigational tool on the right side of the page, so that so that people don't get lost and that it's as organized as possible without being overwhelming. So really it comes down to this, and I'm going to show you a graphic at the end of this that hopefully encapsulates it really well. But beginning your Holocaust unit, really I'll point over here before I click the page. It really comes down to this. Number one, consider the guidelines for teaching about the Holocaust. The guidelines for teaching the Holocaust, guidelines for teaching genocide are both included there. The first 10 guidelines are, in fact, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum's guidelines. And those ones, basically, they give guidance to teachers about things to consider strongly, things that are encouraged and things that are discouraged. And in addition to that, then, on top of the 10, there is an 11th one that is specific to our work and our task at the center, which is to basically the spirit of SB 5612 is to go beyond the teaching of the Holocaust as history, but rather, what does it mean to me? What does it mean to students? And so this idea of using this history kind of like as a foundational piece to make students aware that their actions and inactions matter, that they do have power, that there are choices that can make. The Holocaust was not inevitable. It would not have happened had certain people chosen to act. And then it shows the consequences of failure to act. So that's what really this gets to when teachers use these lessons as springboards for promoting awareness, inclusion, empathy, and tolerance advocacy. They help students realize their potential places not as helpless, but as agents for change, as upstanders. Okay, so number one, consideration of the guidelines. Step two really is gets into the proposed outcomes. Now, the proposed outcomes here is consistent really with guideline number 11. It's this idea that, okay, what do I hope my students emerge from this learning with? What do I want them to walk away with? And what do I need to make sure I establish in the beginning so that by the end of it, my lessons or unit resonates and it's sort of bookended and powerful, and it gets inside really deeply in terms of, if you establish that rationale that I want my students to understand that they have a role, that they have a place. So that's what proposed outcomes rationale gets to. One of the most significant ways that we feel to establish that early is through our pyramid of hate activity. And I want to show you that really quickly. I know many of you may be familiar with it, but really excited we kind of adapted it a little bit and spruced it up, thanks to a real excellent Echoes and Reflections webinar that I saw a couple of weeks ago. And it really gave me a couple of great ideas about, we should put in some primary sources. Let's put in some video clips. Let's put in some images here and really make this lesson sparkle far beyond just Q&A and discussion. So first and foremost, we found, applied the various applicable learning standards. And then I just wanted to scroll down because there are the original stuff that was in the Anti-Defamation League and Echoes lessons are still there, such as this understanding of key terms and definitions, right? So right in the beginning, we're establishing a big piece of it. Let's get the key terms in. And then it goes into the pyramid of hate itself. And so there are two activity options. Activity option 1 is the one that previously existed on our site and through the straight up ADL lesson, which is straight up discussion, asking students to look at biased attitudes, acts of bias, look at the examples and thinking about examples in their own life and in history. But now with option 2, which would take a little bit longer to go through, but I really think it's going to sparkle really well. And so far people have been really excited seeing it. And so by clicking any of these links here, we ask students, so you can see, I'll scroll down here. There are two things here, okay? So for each, they should be looking at the pyramid of hate, provide time for students to reflect, converse, offer their ideas, which stage the pyramid of the pyramid of hate that each image or clip here exemplifies and why. And then part B is asking students to think of other connections, other things that they've seen. So it really takes a little bit of Holocaust history and personal stories of these various survivors that settled in Washington State: Klaus Stern, Eva Tannenbaum Cummins, Stella Tariqa, Sam Farkas. So clicking these, they're about 2-minute long clips, and then getting into discussion about each piece. And then the final part of the lesson ends similar to the previous times, but here we put in what preventative strategies can be done before biased attitudes, after. And so these questions will then ultimately yield the realization that the higher up on the pyramid that it goes, that measures become more and more difficult, if not impossible, especially for individuals to stop the hatred. So again, that's such an incredible lesson that is universal, right? It's not specific just to the Holocaust. It gets in at this very idea that we want to figure out what we can empower students with seeing, recognizing, and doing something against hatred and racism and prejudice in all of their forms. So real great. Hopefully you enjoy that. So once you've looked at the guidelines, then you establish your proposed outcomes, looking at key and providing key terms. So pyramid of hate is key for really both of those pieces, but there are some additional vocabulary that you can get to there. And then the one other big thing, and this is also one of the key guidelines, and that is the absolute importance of establishing historical context. And so for their historical context, right on the beginning, your Holocaust unit part there, you would click introductory lessons. And there, I just want to give you a quick synopsis of about four. Well, one thing I would recommend starting is the film that we've created called With My Own Eyes. It's really sort of a great little introductory overview. And in addition, it kind of gets right into the why are we learning this, the classic student question, because it shows right away that, okay, this is a little bit about the Holocaust. but it keeps happening. Genocides have continued to occur. There's connections to harassment and prejudice and, people mistreating one another. And so immediately students start to see their own place within this history, so that it's something more or bigger than just things that they would have seen in a textbook. So with my own eyes, it's a great way to kind of like hook them in, and then you go from there into what we recommend as one of three options. One option would be to utilize the timeline activity, which was created by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And I've used it in class, and it is the single greatest piece that I think you can use really to establish context. And I'm real happy to say that we also have a remote ability. You can also do it remotely. There's a really great spreadsheet that one of the museum teacher fellows had created, and I think it works so well, and I'm really excited to see people being using it and to hear their experiences, because I think it still can be done in 3 or 4 sessions really powerfully. And then another way to establish the context is through the overview lessons over here. So for each of these overview lessons, they connect to each of the themes that we have on our best practice page, as you can see right here. There are overviews for pre-war, changing world, flight and rescue, and so on. For each of these, I'll click changing world. They all can be done in one class session or less. And there is a very short little synopsis of, in this case, changing world, what was happening in Nazi Germany between 1933 and 38, essentially, 38, 39, still in advance of the final solution. So what was the experience? And this text is enhanced, of course, by then various primary source video clips, about 3-4 minutes long tops for each. And then there are discussion questions that can either be used verbally in terms of in-class discussion, or as well through using maybe assigning 1 or 2 of them as CER type of questions in your class. And then another way to get into their context is by using the Path to Nazi Genocide film that was also created by the USHMM. That's a little about 30 minutes long or so. And if you chunk it and use their proposed questions, that's another way to get the students ready for the next step. The final piece of historical context is to establish pre-war European Jewish life, so that students come to understand that Jews didn't just appear into the world in 1933, that they had been living vibrantly in many instances and in many places throughout Europe for centuries. And it's important that students see that they're just like them. In addition, definitely a bit about the history of anti-Semitism, because many kids are asking right away, why the Jews? And so this helps give a little bit of context to that. At that point, once you're done establishing that, and I really feel that it's so worthwhile, to establish the context part of it, you can achieve all that, I think, within 2 weeks tops, between using Pyramid of Hate, key terms, and those introductory lessons. 2 weeks tops. And then at that point, the sort of world is your oyster. If you're an ELA teacher, at that point, you look at the Holocaust literature section. So you can choose different books, whether you're using one single text or a series of texts like in literature circles. And the hope is that there are enough options there. There are far more than just here. You take a look at those options. There are teacher guides for many of these books. If there's not, please feel free to reach out and I can certainly help you with that. And if you're a social studies or history teacher, at that point, if you take a look at all the themes we have here, any of these sections here, depending on world history, US history, or whatever, there are deeper dive lessons and articles to help you for any of those things. Even for an ELA teacher, for example, if I'm going to be teaching a book and the major theme of it is resistance, for sure, perhaps either the overview section of it or one of the activities, such as what Branda is going to show us very shortly, would be very, very positive and really great there. Okay, so at this point, I hope in a real nutshell, hopefully you've gotten a sense then of what these are and perhaps how to use them. This is a sort of super sped up version of what the best practices are. please contact me personally and us at the center if you have any specific questions or would like to ask for any help, references, or if you have any ideas and suggestions that could help us. Okay, the last real point that I want to make here is that it's important, especially now more than ever during the pandemic, and for most people you're unable to actually see your students, is trying to get students into such deep, heavy learning safely and also exiting them safely, right? I mean, like, how do we get in there without excessively bringing them down or traumatizing? And one great way, I think, to do that, and what Echoes and Reflections as well really recommends, is by, maybe this time more than ever is the time to sort of focus on more positive stories. After you've established the context, picking stories of rescue, picking stories of resistance. And so before we go into that part right now, what I'd love to do and to talk about resistance is I just put up this Menti question here. And what I'd love if you can do is to go to menti.com on your phone or device or your laptop, and then enter this code. And I'll just give a couple of minutes for you to enter 2 separate words that you think best encapsulate what resistance means to you. I'll wait for a couple minutes. See if things come up. Okay, I still don't see anything coming up. So either we're not getting anything or, all right. So I'll move along. So I don't want to take up any more time on this. I'll have to check to see if it was something on Menti's end, but I just refreshed and anything that came up should have gone in, but we'll just move along. Okay, so at this point then, I will click back and I just want to show you then on our page here, resistance. Okay, the topic of resistance. I think the significant thing with resistance here, again, as I was saying, this would be a great opportunity to focus on these stories, a type of resistance story now more than ever, perhaps. So if you go over to our theme of resistance, you will see here, like with any of the other themes, you will see an overview page on resistance with video clips regarding survivors talking to resistance. And in addition, some deep dive lessons and a couple of articles. And one of those at the bottom here, so we try to answer some questions. You can click a link. There's a really great Echoes and Reflections lesson here, the Jewish Resistance, Jewish Partisans Educational Foundation. So these are all things that, especially for history teachers, you might consider if you want to focus on it. And again, as an ELA teacher, things to perhaps enhance a story that involves resistance so that students can see the deeper lens of this. And then here at the very last but not least here is a lesson specific Defiant Requiem. And at this, I will turn it over to Branda Anderson. And we're so happy to have Branda here. Branda has been working with the center for many years and contributed so much of her wealth of knowledge and her experience. Branda has a world history and social studies teacher at Kamiak High School in Mukilteo for over 17 years. She is an Alfred Lerner Fellow, a Powell Fellow, a Defiant Requiem Teacher Ambassador, and she's not only a fellow USHMM Teacher Fellow, but she is also a mentor to other Teacher Fellows. So Branda, thank you for being here, and we can't wait to learn about Defiant Requiem.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that overly generous introduction, I think is what that is. Hello, everybody. I see a lot. I was looking at the list of attendees, and I see a lot of people who know me. So I don't know if that's good or bad. I haven't quite decided yet. Welcome. I'm glad you could all be here. I will say that I'm currently a world history teacher and social studies teacher in my dining room. That's currently where I teach, if you're wondering what you're seeing behind me. I'm really, really excited to be here and to be a part of today's training. Like Paul said, I'm newly minted this summer, a Defiant Requiem Teacher Ambassador, and that's where I'm going to jump in. We've got a small time, and I want to leave a little bit of room for you all to ask questions. Not that I may have all the answers, but at least to put those questions out there. So I'm going to jump in. I just for clarification, because it's Zoom, are we all seeing my screen? Can my panelists tell me if I'm seeing my screen? Somebody, anyone? Okay, perfect, thank you. It's like my students, I'm like, I don't know, are you seeing what I'm seeing? So we're gonna be talking about, Paul's introduced you to the concept of resistance. Resistance is by far one of my favorite topics to teach about in the Holocaust. It's actually the point that got me, kind of jettisoned me more into my studies, a resistance training at the Holocaust Center, actually. I don't know how many years ago it was, kind of lost track. But the story of the Defiant Requiem is just an incredible story of resistance and culture. And as Paul says, I think it's a great one for our students. So I'm going to just jump us right in. So I'm going to, I got to stop sharing. I got to make sure I shared the right way. It's a rookie mistake there. There we go. I shared the wrong thing though. Sorry. I do this every day and I still can't figure it out. There we go. We're back. Is it showing are you still seeing the introduction? Yes, no? Yeah, okay, sorry. Thank you guys. We're gonna start by showing the trailer to the film. The Defiant Requiem is a documentary that was made a number of years ago. And so we're just gonna show that as my introduction here. And let me know in the chat if the sound isn't coming through. That's always the biggest hindrance.
I went downstairs and there was a man sitting and he just said, I want to know, do all of you like to sing?
If people are robbed of freedom, they want to be creative, and they were.
Verdi's music is powerful. It represents a threat. And it was a tremendous challenge to have the Germans right there in front of us and tell them to their face.
It was something which made us strong. It has given us a resistance against our fate.
Doing a performance was not entertainment. It was a fight for life.
This Verdi's Requiem put all of us into another world. This was not the world with the Nazis. This was our world.
These were hours of pure joy, as much as you can call joy in camp.
Here they were, surrounded by man's worst, and these Jewish prisoners were determined to remind everyone of man's best. And I brought the Verdi here because I want to assure these people that we've heard them.
I don't think the soul has to be nourished by anything but by heavenly music. The soul doesn't need anything else.
Fabulous. I'm gonna end my share so I do it right again. So that is the trailer for the film. At the end of this, I'll tell you how you're going to get access to it. You can use it with your students, even in the remote setting. I used it last year as COVID took over. I was teaching my Holocaust and Genocide Studies course, and I was able to use the Requiem, which was amazing. The kids responded really well. What's interesting for me about this, and I didn't even tell Paul this, is I actually got introduced to this the first time by my parents, who are not history teachers or anything like that, but they had gone to a performance of the Requiem in Anchorage, Alaska, which is where they were living at the time, is where I grew up. And because the Requiem goes around, and they heard this story, and they actually introduced it to me a number of years ago. So I just think that's an oddly interesting tidbit. So for those of us that are teachers in the room, and I know that not everyone is, but that's the paradigm I'm going to go for. When teaching about resistance, I think it is wildly important that we first teach students what is being resisted. In the same way, I personally, as many of you know in the room, feel it's very important to teach a history of anti-Semitism before you jump too much into the Nazi era. I feel like that students need to understand what the ideology of the Nazis were, to know what was being resisted and why each piece of resistance is so powerful. Everything from the partisans to the metal combs being made in airline factories and hidden by prisoners, all of these acts of resistance. And so I've put those up for you. It is important to understand that the basic fundamentals of Nazi ideology is, number one, the collective instinct for survival. They believe that every race, they have a very race-based understanding of the world, has this instinct for survival, inherently sort of embedded in each other. And every individual in that group takes part in that collective instinct. And as a result, every group is fighting against one another. The second piece is, for Nazis, the survival of a race. For the Nazis, the term was Volksgemeinschaft, the people's community. It depends on racial purity, not to be with other races outside of your own, and the seizure of territory, Lebensraum, the concept of Lebensraum from the Nazis. To expand your population, you need land to keep to grow food and to keep your people. The third piece is the important one for our conversation, because those two alone are, steeped in many cultures, to be very honest, and certainly steeped in the eugenics ideas that were prominent in America at the time. The third one is the important one for our conversation, is this idea that not only are there races, and not only do races fight to survive, but there is a hierarchy of races, and that there are some that are more valuable than others. Of course, at the top of that is the German race, the Aryan race, and at the very end of the hierarchy for the Nazis are the Jews. And the ideas of Jews as a race is an idea that the Nazis are building upon. They don't invent it. It kind of establishes in the mid 1800s, but they're building on that idea. And so for them, the Jews are the very bottom of that hierarchy. And to understand their relationship to the Jews, we need to understand their basic anti-Semitic assumptions. Number one, they see Jews as a race. And as a race, the Nazis believed that the Jews were seeking dominance. This is a poster many of you recognize, De Ewige, the Eternal Jew. This is one of my favorite posters, propaganda posters, to go over with students, because of the clear mixed messaging Jews are capitalists and greedy, but they're also communists. Like, just I think it's an interesting study in propaganda for certain. So the belief that Jews seek dominance. The Nazis believed that the Jews, especially pre-World War II, had no country of their own, and that the only way it's possible that the Jewish race has survived without their own country is by essentially being parasites on other societies and taking them over. And that by doing so, they weaken those other races and those other countries. And all of that is about this goal of domination. The Jews were, and it's important to understand this, the special enemy of the German people. And for the Nazis, destruction of the Jews and their culture was the paramount goal. So I want our students to know that that's the goal. So that's what, when we talk resistance, that's what they're resisting, is not only physical destruction of the Jewish people, but the destruction of Jewish culture and mindset. So let's jump to Terezin. Terezin, also known as Theresienstadt, which is the German name. I kind of lean towards the Czech name just because it's, I think, more conducive to being, what's the word I want? A good steward of the memory. So Terezin is here. You see what was Czechoslovakia. I like to tell my students how much the map in Europe has changed since I was their age. So it's in this sort of northern part of Czechoslovakia, tucked very, very close to Germany. Theresienstadt, and then you see the map here. These are both maps from USHMM. So if you want them in your class, you can easily get them off the USHMM website. Lots of great resources, as Paul alluded to. Ghettos became the second piece of the Nazi movement through Europe. As they moved east, taking over territories, they then became domineering over more Jews in Europe. And they needed to establish some sort of place to facilitate their control of the Jewish population, knowing that they wanted to do something with them later. They weren't going to leave them. Ghettos were never meant to be a permanent solution. They were sort of a stopgap between what they had been doing in Germany, which was persecuting Jews and trying to get them to leave, to now what do we do now that the war has moved east? They were kind of temporary way stations. In October of 1938, the Germans occupied the Sudetenland, this area that kind of tucks up nicely into Germany, which had, as those of you that have studied history, you know, Europe, the borders are sort of arbitrary. People of different cultures live all over. And the borders sometimes encapsulate different people. That was the Sudetenland. It had been Germanic and Czech. In March of 39, they occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. And it's in October of 41 that Terezin is established outside of Prague. And it's meant to be a place where they could deport Jews to before they deported them to the next stage. Now, in this stage, in 41, you have Einsatzgruppen and you have the beginnings of some of the death camps, but there's still that question of how do we handle all of this? Theresienstadt was essentially a refitted military installation. The Jews of Prague were made to go in there and work and refit it into a ghetto/camp. The basic function of Theresienstadt was meant to be sort of a settlement for certain categories of Jews. So Theresienstadt is unique. It is not like any other ghetto because it's both a ghetto and a camp. And it was the place that the Germans were sending certain classifications of Jews, specifically Jews from Germany and Austria, specifically older Jews that were 65 years old and plus that couldn't work. Some Jews that had fought in World War I for Germany and been injured or had gotten something higher than the Iron Cross, because there was this dilemma still in Germany, like, we honor our veterans, can we kill them even though they're Jews? What do we do? So it became this place where people were sent. They also sent early on from Germany and from other areas that they occupied, Austria and Czech and Poland eventually, prominent Jewish artists, musicians, and cultural figures whose disappearance might raise an eyebrow internationally, well-known people. And so the idea was, we'll put them here for now. And then, of course, with all those artists, they forced Jewish artists in Theresienstadt to produce Nazi propaganda. So Terezin had a double purpose. It was a transit camp. It's kind of seen in the Nazi worldview as sort of a retirement camp. That doesn't mean it was anything nice or anything that you wanted to do. But as the final solution is developing and getting more codified, it is a place to put people. It was also the center point of Nazi propaganda, as most of you know. I know, knowing some of the people in the room, I know some of you know all of this, but I want to make sure we're clear on it. Terezin was used to cover up what was really going on in other ghettos. And in 1943, the Nazis gave the International Red Cross permission to view the camp. And I saw in the chat that somebody brought up soccer at Terezin, and part of that was related to the, I'd be interested in that lesson plan, by the way, because I have a lot of students that would connect to that. So if somebody's going to build that, that's phenomenal. They put on soccer matches for the International Red Cross to see. Say this is just a model city for the Jews. They've got classes going on over here, and look, there's a soccer game, and look, come see this performance of music, and there was a children's opera put on. And so in 1944, that's what happened. They cleaned up the camp. They made it look really good, made it look like it was not a bad place to be. All of that was 100% propaganda to try to release the pressure from the International Red Cross. Over the 4 years of existence, over 140,000 people were imprisoned at Terezin. 4,300 died in the ghetto. 88,000 were sent to Auschwitz and died, and over 15,000 children that went through Terezin died in the Holocaust. So it's again, okay. That's just a brief introduction. I know that the center has more resources. USHMM has a lot of great resources on Terezin if you're interested. It's a lot of art and things connected. So let's jump into what we came for today. Raphael Schechter. This is Raphael Schechter here in the picture. He was a pianist, a composer, and a conductor. He's from the Prague region. In 1941, he was deported to Terezin. The Jews deported out of Prague were told they could only take a certain amount of things with them. He actually took 2 musical scores with him, which is one of the things that's super intriguing to me about him. I'm not musical at all. I am the opposite, for those of you that don't know me. I am the opposite of musical. I love music. I just have no connection to it. But for him, if you think about being deported and the things, your limited weight you could take, he took 2 scores, and one of them was Verdi's Requiem. When he got settled in Terezin, he actually came across an old piano in one of the barracks basements. And what he found very quickly is that he kind of gravitated, as you could guess, artistic members of the ghetto started gravitating toward each other and building sort of a community. And what he did was he offered them the opportunity clandestinely to learn Verdi's Requiem. And for those of you who don't know, Requiem is actually a Catholic mass for the dead. There's a ton of symbolism, especially for our older learners. So some really great things you can do kind of talking about the Requiem. And I'll show you those resources. Now, remember, he had 1 score. They learned to sing this from memory with that 1 score and the 1 piano he's using. The picture here on the slide is the only known photo we have of the singers doing the Requiem. The reason we have this is this was at the time of the Red Cross's visit to Terezin, and they were preparing for that performance for the Red Cross and the Nazi leadership. He taught them to perform by memory. And what's important to understand about the Requiem, which makes it an incredible form of resistance, because, and I'm going to come back to this a little bit, the language of the Requiem is that God will sit in judgment of all people, and all people will be liberated from suffering, and there will be vengeance for acts of cruelty. Now, you imagine these prisoners who are going through the ultimate acts of cruelty, or who are suffering at the hands of the cruelest people on the planet, singing that to them in Latin. And so on the Defiant Requiem site that I'm going to show you, there are survivor testimonies where they talk about that feeling of what it felt like to sing those words to their captors and what that meant for them. They took the meaning to heart. They felt it meant for them that they would find deliverance and liberation, which is a big message in the film as well. The last performance of the Requiem was 1944, before the German leadership and the Red Cross, and that's where that photo is from. The survivors said the Requiem had great meaning and that it nourished their spirits in circumstances in terrible circumstances, and it was a powerful act of resistance against the Nazi goal of dehumanization. Remember, I talked about the Nazi ideology and the desire, the goal would be the elimination of the Jews physically and culturally. And this becomes a form of resistance for our students to understand that they are keeping their humanity, that they are fighting that back, which is amazing. Most of the choir was sent to Auschwitz after this performance on October 17th, 1944. Schechter survived Auschwitz and 3 other camps, but died on a death march 1 month before Czech was liberated. The key with the Requiem is to understand that the Nazis' goals of physical and cultural destruction of the Jews. One of the Terezin choir survivors said, they only have our bodies, they do not have our souls or our meaning, making it this sort of really true form of resistance. And that when we talk spiritual resistance versus armed resistance, spiritual resistance is not just a struggle against, it's a struggle for dignity, humanity, and moral values. And many people felt not specifically in Terezin, but in places like Warsaw, and Vilna and other places where we saw armed resistance, that spiritual resistance really laid the groundwork for armed resistance, keeping the human spirit alive. So that's kind of the basic story of the Requiem. I wanted to get that for you. Here's the website, and Paul, if you want to type that into the chat so that people can click right to it if they want. On our website, on the Defiant Requiem Foundation website, there are 4 modules and lessons that you as teachers will have access to. Now, I will say, to get access to the films and to the modules, you have to register with the site. It's free. So go ahead and register and get registered in, and then you'll have access to everything. But in the meantime, I will show you what that all looks like. There's 4 different units. And I will say that part of the work that I was a part of this summer is these are being edited and changed and adapted. They pulled a bunch of teachers together from all over the country and all over the world. Actually, we had an educator from England as well, who gave good feedback. And I know that they're going to be updating in the new year some of these assignments. There's a lot of interesting stuff on here. We're going to go jump right into education. Hopefully it clicks right in for me. There we go. And here you see our 4 different modules. How am I doing on time? I'm watching the time very closely. So the modules, you have 2 social studies modules, and then an English language arts one, and one that is definitely more geared toward a musical classroom and art classroom, but can be used depending on the level of your students. And I know you already do this as educators, you adapt and change things to fit your students. And so I'm aware that you could probably adapt or change these as needed. I will say that once you register, you'll find that you get access to there's 2 versions of the documentary. There's a full one that's like an hour and a half, which is too long for most of our students. But then there's also a education one that's less than 45 minutes, and you'll get access to that with a password, and you can share it with your students through there, which is phenomenal. I'm just going to jump right in, tell you a little bit about the Defiant Requiem Foundation, and then jump into the lesson plans really quick. The foundation was started 10 years ago by Murray Sidlin. You saw Murray in the film clip. He's a conductor, and he ran across this story, and it really resonated with him, and that's why he's been conducting the Requiem across the country and across the world, performances of it. And then obviously in the film, you see they take it back to Terezin to perform there. So let's look at these assignments. So I'm going to jump right in just to show you the first one. The first one is your introductory one. It's going to be the most basic, and it's going to be the easiest one to plug in. This is the one that I actually did last spring with my students. I adapted it a little bit. Now I'm dealing with seniors, and we were in a Holocaust and Genocide Studies elective, so their depth of knowledge was just a little bit more. So again, you would adapt according to your needs. All of the lessons right now are kind of framed the same way. You've got your essential questions and your objectives. You've got your standards, and then a bunch of notes. This is what they like to call kind of a good on-ramp lesson. If you need, depending on what you're teaching and where you're teaching it, there are lots of introductions. Like Paul mentioned, the Path to Nazi Genocide film. could be used as an introduction. There's lots of connections to the USHMM and Jewish resistance during the Holocaust at Yad Vashem. So there's lots of resources for both you to use as a background or to connect with your students. They do have a reading guide that, or excuse me, a viewing guide that you can, it actually opens as a Google Doc. I edited mine just because I added more. You can do what you need there. And it gives a lot, each of them gives a good background, because I know I've kind of ran through this quite quickly. I'm watching that time, of the Requiem and of Raphael Schechter and what he did. So in this one, as you go through in this one, every lesson is tied to a viewing of the film. Now, what I did in the spring, and you could do what you need to do for your students, I gave them the link and the password to go watch it digitally, because we were already home learning. I will probably do that again next year if we're still home. I prefer watching films like that with my students. It's just not an option. So that's why I kind of adapted the questions to make them a little more in depth for my students, but I was also dealing with seniors. And again, you can kind of on-ramp where you want. You could just do this as a standalone, maybe in a world history class where students maybe don't have a ton of depth, and get them thinking about the Holocaust, or jump in after that. This is, again, I think a pretty decent lesson plan, getting them thinking about ideas of oppression, deception, propaganda, resistance, and hope. Paul was trying to do the Mentimeter, which usually works really well, but that's also a fun thing to do. You could do that on a Padlet, if you're familiar with Padlet, or any other type of resources you might have to get kids defining what they think resistance is. So that's one lesson you can do that's broken up. You can do it one day, you can do it in 2 days. Just again, it's going to depend a lot on your students and what works for you. The second lesson goes more into propaganda, as again, there was a discussion about the soccer, not just the use of Terezin for propaganda with the International Red Cross, but in general, producing films to make Terezin this model ghetto. And this is another great, if you want, there's primary sources in here, there's pieces of art you can use. The third one, the English language one, is pretty intensive, because it's dealing with rhetoric, and it's using the language of the Requiem to discuss rhetoric. This, to me, feels like a higher level, but it just, again, it always depends on your students. And then this one deals more with the music. Up at the top, you'll find resources. So depending on where you are in your level of comfort with teaching about the Holocaust, all kinds of resources linking to USHMM, to the Ghetto Without Walls, which is the Czech website for Terezin. Much like Paul mentioned, there's also a link here to the Echoes and Reflections, Cultural and Spiritual Resistance lesson plan, which I think is actually really great. So, and then there's the Red Cross stuff, and the connection to the Red Cross there from the Holocaust Museum in DC. So there are a lot of resources for you to on-ramp. Once you've registered, you have access to this. And like I said, they are going to, I don't know why I went to that. Pardon me. They are going to adapt and change some of these and grow these lessons to make them more friendly. I know that one of the things they're doing right now is to make the worksheets that go with them fillable PDFs for distance learning, if that is something you prefer. I'm hoping they do both. I encourage both Google Docs and fillable PDFs. So that's kind of where I want to, oh, the one last thing I do want to say coming back. Like I said, I am a Defiant Requiem teacher ambassador. It was an incredible program this summer. We did it distance wise. We were supposed to be in DC, but obviously with the pandemic, we were unable. They will be opening up the opportunity to become a teacher ambassador. If this is something that you think you want to be a part of, they'll be putting together an application process. If you're interested in deepening your knowledge in this and becoming an ambassador, I've thrown my email up here. If you're interested in that, go ahead and shoot me an email, or if you have questions or if I can be of any help, you can always email me so that I can get your information passed on for when they start looking for more teacher ambassadors in the future. So I want to stop there and leave a little room. I don't see any questions in the chat. With my students, I assume that means you've fallen asleep, but I don't know if that's true of you guys. So Paul, that's kind of where I end.
Okay, thank you so much, Branda. That was so great, and that's a great comment, Nance. Yeah, that's it's so great, and of course, I love these resources, and you know, I know the mention of, you know, that Alexandra Zapruder of Salvaged Pages fame and otherwise, you know, has her hands all over this whole project along with Marie, and you know, some of us, you know, Powell Teacher Fellows had the opportunity to meet Murray, you know, when he presented a couple of summers ago in the days of in-person things. One quick question, Branda, is that you know, I remember in speaking with you the other day that you indicated that you were able to teach this. Is that right, to your students last year when you were still in person, or was that already remote?
That was remote. I'm just typing in my email for everybody. That was remote. So we went remote pretty early in the semester. So we did this remotely, and so I took the worksheet and adapted it and gave the kids the login and the password and went from there. And the feedback from my students was phenomenal because the film's about 45 minutes. It's kind of the perfect chunk of time, and they were really intrigued. And kind of like you said, with giving stories, telling the truth of the Holocaust, telling the causes, telling, you know, all the underlying things related. This is one of those, not unlike the Bielskis or any of those other stories of resistance, that gives kids hope and reminds them that resistance can sometimes be small things. And I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, I can see it being so instrumental or complementary really to, you know, teaching, especially at the high school level, you know, working, you know, alongside something like the, you know, the Bielski story or From the Ashes of Sobibor, these other sort of physical resistance to offer sort of spiritual resistance conceptually by one of these sort of like, you know, pun intended, deep dives. So I really appreciate it. And I think it's so great. And I'm so glad we had this opportunity to share this information with teachers. So to everyone here, you know, if you do still have a question, please type it in. But in the meantime, you did see that I shared the link both for clock hours as well as for the evaluation. So I will follow that up via email so that you can get that information there if you didn't already copy and paste those links. But we really value your feedback, so we'd love to get it. It does inform us, and we continue to adapt our programs constantly here at the center. And working with such great teachers as Branda throughout the years really, you know, deepens us and broadens and gives so much depth and heft to the resources that we can provide and share with all of you teachers who are doing such a great job in your classes. So thank you again, Branda. I sure appreciate you, and I know we all do here. And teachers, thank you for being here and giving up a valuable hour of your time here. Hopefully you've taken something from it, and we look forward to seeing you and meeting with you, hopefully both virtually and in real time in the near future. Thanks for being here.